results of the Home Moving Trends survey last year, I started by marvelling at the sheer scale of the response. It had catapulted from 15,000 in 2019 to 35,000. And over at Dataloft HQ, frankly, we were awestruck. But back then, when the survey went out, we were still in that strange period where everyone was at home and doing quizzes. And remember family quizzes? The virtual pub quiz? Jay Flynn, anyone? I suspect most of us have moved on since then. So we were managing our expectations down for this year, and we'd have been very happy with 15,000. But you did it again. You mailed out the questionnaire to your lists, and just shy of 30,000 people filled it in that 2-week period of July 2021. So there was no lockdown fluke after all. And the other key thing about timing is that when we asked these questions in 2020, it was pretty early days for the pandemic and the world was still in shock. Businesses were struggling with remote working technology, and most of us expected to be back in the office by September. So in some ways, the answers we got then needed to be tested again. Now, today, it's been long enough to establish genuine long-term behaviour changes, and this time the results feel more solid. So do take the time to read it in your workbook. There's a lot in there. For today, I've chosen to concentrate on 3 things from the survey findings. Social change, because a survey on this scale is a valid indicator of social trends. What do people want now from the places they choose to live? Secondly, sustainability. And I want to highlight this because it's rising up the agenda fast. And in the first 2 weeks of November, the UK is going to be hosting COP26, the 26th UN Climate Change Conference. And it touches on buyer preferences as well as the way we run our businesses. And the third and the main topic I've got for today is trust. Because trust has been a recurring theme throughout the life of this survey for over a decade. And because this year, Stephen M.R. Covey is the keynote speaker with his advice on how trust underpins success in business and what it means and how to earn it. So I'm going to start with trust. And this is the recurring survey headline. We ask, what has most influenced your choice of selling agent? 2/3 said it was because they liked and trusted their agent. And only 17% said it was the lowest fee. And of the 5,000 landlords who answered the survey, 60% chose the agent because they liked and trusted them. And for landlords, as well as for vendors, it sat alongside 2 other key things: good local market knowledge and confidence in ability to market the property. And both of those relate back to trust as well, in its broadest sense, in the Stephen Covey sense of earning trust through your behaviours. So I think we can translate that into a really simple mantra. The agent who inspires trust is most likely to win the instruction. But by the time you're invited into a market appraisal, how much groundwork has already been laid in building that trust? It's hard to measure, but I'm sure it happens over a very long period of time, many years during which those people are not even thinking about moving house. Which means that you have to put as much effort into communicating with potential clients in the spaces in between transactions as during the transaction. So we at Dataloft, we've been working closely this year with John Lewis because they're planning to enter the residential market as landlords. And we've been analysing rental markets around their Waitrose stores, looking at who rents, what prices, what kind of property and so on. And I mentioned John Lewis because they have built a huge bank of trust. They topped the UK Best Brand rankings, this is just one measure, in 2020 for the 4th year running. And to win that, they're scored on impression, quality, value, satisfaction, recommendation, and reputation. And it made me think about how much strategy goes into building that trust. years of small touches, the easy no-quibble refunds, the generous guarantees, the efficient deliveries. And they have to bring all that awareness to their brand as a landlord, and it's taken very, very seriously. So you can imagine the sensitivities around trust. If this new residential division is not an exemplary landlord, if they have any conflict, disappoint on any level, the brand damage could be catastrophic for John Lewis. So in his book, Stephen Covey identifies 13 trust behaviours, and he describes a ripple effect. When you earn the trust of one, it transmits to many. And that's because we, the homeowners, talk to each other. We share recommendations. We share stories of our experiences, good and bad. And I think the weight given to trust in the survey findings is particularly important because agents don't always get the best press on that. Ipsos Mori publishes an annual veracity index. They read out a list of professions and they ask this question: tell me if you generally trust them to tell the truth or not. And you know what's coming. Nurses, engineers, teachers at the top, journalists, politicians, ad execs and estate agents right at the bottom. And actually some way below private landlords, bankers and economists. But I'm not even showing this as a graphic because it actually feels unfair. And when we look at the survey, we get a very different perspective. So what's that about? Well, my interpretation is that when people are actually in the process of moving, they have confidence in their agent. There's a genuine trust. And agents do inspire trust and it influences decisions. But it's in those long periods in between moving home, the memory fades and the perception changes. And for me, that's the strongest evidence possible that it is essential to maintain contact. Stay front of mind, stay in touch. It's really very important. When we bought our house, the selling agent showed enormous integrity, and I remember thinking, I will definitely use that agent when we come to sell. But that was 15 years ago, and I don't feel that anymore because they haven't engaged with me. There's no relationship. But I want to pick up on one of the 13 trust behaviours that Stephen Covey lists, and that's talk straight. Say it as it is. And I know it can be hard. Does a potential vendor really want to know that demand is low or prices haven't risen since they bought their home? It can be really hard to talk straight, especially when it's not what they want to hear. So, going back to the survey. The survey shows that vendors have really unrealistic expectations about how long it will take to sell their home. 86% expected it to take less than 3 months between exchange and completion. And in fact, only 45% of sales were completed within 3 months. 42% hoped for under 2 months. 18% experienced that. And actually, they don't know themselves, understandably, because life throws curved balls, as the last year has shown us. So we compared in the survey how long people expected to live in their homes with the reality. 18% expected to move within 5 years, but actually 28% were on the move in less than 5 years. And there's a big discrepancy at the other end in the 20 years plus too. Trust is built up over a very long period of time, and it might take years of patient engagement before the opportunity comes your way. Have you talked straight over all those years? I think the frustrating conversation about fees might come down to talk straight too. If you want to pay less, we have to deliver less. We can offer more if you're prepared to entertain a higher fee. That fee squeeze has been happening for years, and now 50% of home movers are paying less than or paying 1% or less in fees. And yet, 83% told us in the survey that it was not the reason they selected their agent. So what is going on there? Maybe it's no longer a point of contention. Maybe the customer's actually won some real territory on this one. But whether the solution for you is to reduce costs to line up with expectations or to add value and raise expectations, there's plenty to consider on the outsource agenda. Kerfuffle has identified about 800 suppliers who can automate and streamline processes or who can build on what you're good at. And this is just a slightly random thought, but the survey found that home movers who were looking for a change of scene or lifestyle, that was what was motivating their move, they increased their use of agent websites. We can assume that's probably because they're researching new locations. So your vendors are also buyers. Could you help them research their purchase? Could that be a new value add? You're in a great position to give advice. You're the gatekeeper for information on the biggest investment most people make in their lives. So keep talking to them. Use all the channels. You have so many ways to stay in touch, whether that's through your website, social media, face-to-face, magazines, video. Video is an incredibly effective way of engaging. I think Zoom has really helped with that. People are way more comfortable in front of a camera. I spent my summer holiday this year cycling from one end of Britain to the other. It was quite a challenge. And the absolute halfway point on the journey was Lancaster. And as I rode through Lancaster, I found myself looking out for JD Gallagher because Michelle Gallagher had shared some really inviting images of their new offices on LinkedIn, which had somehow lodged in my mind as a really homely, comforting place. And it showed me the power of talking directly on social media to really make a lasting impression. 17% of respondents in the survey said they had used agents' websites more than ever before this year. And more than half of vendors said they had visited the agent's website before making an appointment. And there's a lot on websites in the workbook. And the survey delves into website features, so do take a look. There's a lot to think about in there. The quality of the images on your website, the functionality of the search capability, how viewable it is on a mobile, how you display your local housing market information. Having said that, there's still a preference for the traditional modes of communication at certain key stages. So 75% prefer to hear by phone, they prefer a phone call to hear about offers and to hear that contracts have been exchanged. And this year, we introduced a new question about reviews and accreditations because we wanted to get a sense of how much influence they carry these days. 74% of respondents said that they trust reviews completely or to some extent. Half don't read them, but half do, so they really matter. And of those who read the reviews, 20% would be most likely to have read them on the agent's website. So that's a really important way of cultivating trust. And the last point I want to highlight on trust comes through in the reasons why people invest in property. It's your safe place. So 71% of landlords have no intention of changing their investment portfolios. 17.5% hope to increase their portfolio this year. And of those looking to expand their portfolio, the reasons chime entirely with trust. It's for my pension. It's the safest place to invest. I'm building a business. And after this period when so many certainties have been undermined, property really does represent security. People put their trust in property as an investment. Throughout the last year, there's been a huge amount of press comment on gardens, extra bedrooms, outside space. Much of that was journalist conjecture, but now we can share some hard statistics that back it up. So, a year ago, 35% of respondents told us that gardens had become more important. But look now, 61% of home movers say a garden has become more important as a reason motivating their move. And that's a big shift. All those sold out garden furniture supplies. We now understand how to use blankets and fire pits and solar lights and canopies to extend the outdoor season. And a larger property, you've all seen it, But here's the evidence. In July 2020, 27% were looking for a larger property. A year on, it's 47%. And I was also struck by the stat about working remotely. 16% of home movers said that the ability to work remotely had impacted their decision to move. That's 1 in 6. Last year, it was 5%, 1 in 20. It's a big social change and it's not temporary. And we've heard about big tech companies' plans for flexible working, but actually much closer to home, companies are starting to come out with their policies now. So JLL has gone with a policy they call Flex Your Day. Arup, the big engineering practice, has called theirs Workplace Unbound. Heard another one that was Work Without Boundaries. And they vary, but generally they seem to be landing on 2 to 3 days in the office, and then combined with work from home or work from anywhere, whether that's your bolt hole in the lakes or Devon or with your parents or whatever. There's been this conversation in your sector for years about the high street office. The conclusion I would draw from this survey is that you don't need to be on the high street to exchange information, but people are making big and complex decisions and they value face-to-face. Whether that needs to take place on the high street is a different question, but given what's happened to retail, it's probably not an expensive solution. So 61% of survey respondents consider the high street office very useful or essential, and another 23% say it's a nice to have. And that's a pretty big yes vote for the high street office, especially when there's an element of advice or support needed, when the move is prompted by bereavement or equity release or ill health or retirement or job relocation or investment. But that's not to say it should stay the same. And perhaps the question to ask yourselves is, what form should that office take? And how can you change it? Retailers are rethinking the high street experience, and agents should be doing the same. There's a lot more activity on local high streets now with agile working practices. And that brings me to a finding from the renter survey, which I want to flag up. 91% of renters considered pleasant neighbours to be an important or very important when looking for a new home. 79% said local community was important or very important. And the reason I find that so surprising is because so often you hear that renters are terrible neighbours because they don't care about the place they live in. This research explodes the myth that renters don't care about their neighbourhoods. And it was up there with affordability and broadband speed as a criteria. And in another question, related, 72% of renters would be influenced to rent for longer if there's a sense of community in the local area, and 69% if there was a sense of community in the building itself. The experience of the pandemic has shone a spotlight on the value of community and neighbourhood, and it will continue to influence housing choices. Which brings me to my final theme, and it feels like a good place to finish because it's about trust and the future and how we care for the places we live in and the planet we live on. There's been an enormous increase in awareness of environmental responsibility in business as well as in personal lives. Almost half of the renters who answered the survey said they would come to a decision faster if the property met green credentials. 60% would stay longer. And amongst renters aged 18 to 34, the proportion willing to pay a premium for green credentials doubled. This issue matters, and it's an important part of winning the trust of the next generation. And I don't know if you know this, but housing emits more than 40% of the UK's carbon emissions. And 2019 EPC data showed that carbon emissions were twice as high for existing homes as for new build. And yet, when we look at new build in the survey, we see that there remains a key problem with trust for new homes. Though half of homeowners won't even consider a new home, and the primary reason given is concerns over build quality. That's a trust issue, real or imagined. And for those who will consider new homes, energy efficiency is a primary driver. The Future Home Standard is going to make new homes even more energy efficient by 2025. So awareness is rising, Policy is coming at us fast, and the property industry is in a position to make a difference. It's one of the biggest single issues of trust, and it will bear on the way we run our businesses, as well as the homes people choose to live in. Okay, I'm out of time. I can only scratch the surface of what's in the workbook. Please do read it at your leisure. But there's 3 messages I hope you'll take away from this. Number 1, always be prepared to talk straight. Say it as it is. Secondly, engage with homeowners in the long periods in between moving house. And finally, rethink the role of your office on the high street with sustainability in mind. Thank you. I hope you found that useful, and please spend that time reading the workbook.